The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
Welcome back to the ELL Collaborative Summer Academy 2025 at MTSU. We are about to have our final session, and first of all, we've had some fabulous sessions today from the Tennessee Department of Ed this morning. The audiences we have range from large urban districts, well-resourced, large staffing, suburban districts, pretty well-resourced, and small rural districts. That diversity of what you call urbanicity means there are really different needs, different cultures, different climates, different situations in schools that require different kinds of services. So we just heard from a successful suburban district, Rutherford County. We're getting ready to hear from something that I'm fascinated to hear about, and this is a rural collaboration. So come on over here, ladies. I'm introducing April Davis, EL Coordinator, Migrant Programs and Teacher of Claiborne County Schools, and Sabrina Cox, Coordinator of ESL Migrant Programs in Ray County Schools, and then Christy Altizer, EL Instructional Coach and Migrant Programs in Sullivan County Schools. So they have, remember we talked about spheres of influence? They have initiated a sphere of influence right here. They just got together and started working together, and they have formed a collaboration. You know, when you've heard of economy of scale, where if you're working on a small scale, it's harder to do some things than maybe if you joined with others to do something on a little bit larger scale. It's more efficient. That's what's happening in a rural collaboration like this. So I'm eager to hear what they have to say, what they have learned together, and what they've implemented in their small, under-resourced rural districts. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, you are correct, yes.
Okay, so welcome, and I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
Thanks. So as she just mentioned, my name is April Davis, and I am from Claiborne County. I have been teaching EL for this coming year will be my 23rd year. My background is early childhood and EL. My name is Sabrina Cox. I'm with Ray County Schools. I'm going into my 14th year of ESL instruction. I actually came from Georgia back in 2018, and then I've seen the changes that have happened in Tennessee. So we have grown a lot over the last few years. I am the ESL coordinator and actually the migrant coordinator for Ray County Schools. So I actually have two hats for my district.
I'm Christy Altizer. I'm from Sullivan County Schools, and I taught 17 years in the classroom, gen ed classroom, 7 years ESL classroom, and now my first year is ESL instructional coach. Wish me luck.
And I just want to emphasize how important this professional development is to me. This is where I got in touch with Sabrina. With one of our state PDs, I retouched with Christy. So we do network a lot. If I don't have the answer to a question, I'm always calling one of these ladies. And so that's just an idea for you just to keep the people around you and just to reach out and to bridge those networks, because we do learn something from each other all the time. I'm probably calling her once a week, so it is pretty nice to hear different ideas and things that they're doing. So today's professional development goes along with everything that has been shared this morning. And the funny thing is that we had no idea what was going to be presented. We didn't know who was going to be presented, the content, or anything. And so as Joanne and Raven had mentioned this morning, that a big initiative that is going on in the state of Tennessee right now is the Acceleration for All. And so I know we went through this earlier. We're going to do like a simple thumbs up, thumbs to the side, thumbs down. What we want to know is what kind of information or familiarity do you have with the IPG? So if you know the IPG, you have seen this, you understand the different core actions and everything, you're going to give a thumbs up. If you've heard it and you know a little bit about it, you're going to give a thumbs to the side. If you really haven't been involved with the IPG in your district and you really don't know anything about it, you're going to do a thumbs down, okay? So if you guys can just show a show of thumbs, what is your knowledge with the IPG? Be honest, be honest. Okay, so I want to say, I really think this professional development is going to be very helpful to you all, because one thing, and I'm being very honest, this is my first year being a part of the Acceleration for All, okay? I have learned a lot since October, right? And I've learned a lot getting ready for this presentation, and I've learned a lot more trying to help my district understand how to support our English learners. So from the poll earlier this morning, the majority of you are English learner or ESL teachers, right? So one part of the initiative is to have you in the conversations with general classroom teachers to help them remember that they are Tier 1 classroom students first, before there are English learners, before there are special ed students, before there are RTI students, right? But we are here to help support them. And so one way to do that is using this tool called the IPG. Now, the IPG is not a tool to try and use for evaluative purposes. The purpose for the IPG is to try and help make sure that we, classroom teachers, are helping all of our students access Tier 1 instruction, right? But the way that we're presenting the IPG is to help you go back to your districts, because when they come to you and they're like, hey, we need your ESL expertise of how to help our teachers better, help them provide better Tier 1 instruction to their students, right? When I went and had to do my involvement, my participation, I didn't know what to say. You guys know a lot. I was over here in this corner and she was sharing a lot of information of, okay, what are the supports? Keep the support up all year long, even though that if it's needed, keep it up, right? Sometimes you're going to take it away. We know this, but when you're asked to come and sit down and be a part of these conversations, you go blank, right? So we want to give you guys a tool. One is to know, what is the IPG? What are we looking for? I've been a part of the IPG walks. So is April. And Christy is probably going to be a part of it soon. But when you're called to go in and participate in these literacy walkthroughs, you're like, okay, what am I looking for from an ESL perspective, right? But I'm the ESL teacher. How can I support my classroom teachers to make sure my student is not sitting in the back of the classroom because they don't have the supports they need, right? So we really hope that you will take this presentation. It's going to be a deep dive. It's going to seem like we're reading straight from the PowerPoint. And the reason for that is because this is new for a lot of you guys. And you're going to have to look over this more than once, more than twice. Because I'm telling you, one, it's important to our students. And two, it's going to be important for you to collaborate with your teachers, right? So you're going to want to look over this in the future. So for the very first time that I even heard about an IPG, I got an email from our district team to meet them at a local high school. And they said, we're going to do some walkthroughs. I had no clue what type of walkthroughs, but I've done observations, so I thought, okay, I can handle this. So once I got there, they discussed IPG, and I had no clue what it was. I didn't know how to find it. So once I got the IPG and went to do the walkthroughs, during the debriefing, I realized that my perspective was completely different than all the rest of my district team members. So that's when I thought, okay, I'm missing something. I'm lost. I'm not sure what's going on. So as soon as I got in my car, I called Christy and I called Sabrina. Hey, do you know about this IPG? What is it? So that is another reason we decided this is extremely important, just so you have that information when you hear it. Knowledge is power, and you'll be aware of it.
Now, during today's presentation, we will have a few discussions, and to encourage your participation, we brought prizes.
All right, so what we want you to think about is, what is the purpose of the Core Knowledge Building Tennessee Instructional Practice Guide for K through 12? So that is what you have. And just to let you know, there are a few versions, right? And from our presentation, we're looking at this from elementary, middle, and high school, okay? The IPG is a tool, and it can be used with any instruction. It doesn't matter what the curriculum is, because we're all supposed to be using HQIM, right? It's really basically looking at how can we better our instruction so that every student in our class is accessing that HQIM, right? So it's really for everybody. There is another one, there's a Foundation for Literacy for K through 2 or pre-K through 2, but that's something else that you might want to get with your district on to see what it is that they're really focusing on in their district, your district. Also, to support all educators in identifying areas where high quality instruction can be enriched, so all students can access Tier 1 grade level classroom instruction. And again, this is what the initiative is calling for, right? All students are accessing that Tier 1 instruction.
Okay, our learning objectives is to become familiar with the Tennessee K-12 Core Knowledge Building IPG from an ESL perspective. We also hope to identify specific questions and address specific considerations unique to each section of the IPG, critical for intellectual preparation at all levels, elementary, middle, and high school.
One thing I do want to touch on that my district has realized through the literacy walkthroughs is the difference between planning and intellectual prep. Raise your hand if you have a good understanding of intellectual prep. Okay, there's a difference, right? So planning is where, when we're looking at planning, you have your content, you have your curriculum in front of you. But your prep is, what are the steps are you taking? What are the steps your classroom teachers are taking, looking through their HQIM, looking for areas where their students are going to need support to access the instruction and to participate, right? What is the teacher preparing? How are they preparing? And how are they going to make sure their students are involved, right? That's going to be two things that we really focus on with the IPG. So one thing to start about, if you're looking at your IPG, you have a culture of learning is the first section. The next section you have Core Action 1, Core Action 2, Core Action 3, and Core Action 4. Core Action 4 was added this year, and it supports for all students. We had the walk, as Joanne mentioned this morning, the IPG has been around. I wasn't a part of it until this year. But what happened is when you started having your ESL teachers come in, your special ed coordinators come in, and they're observing their students, and they're like, what supports do my students have to access this HQIM, right? So they added Core Action 4. So what we're doing today is we're going through each section, going through it, and we have questions that we have identified for you to think about when you're sitting with your classroom teachers, or if you're called to with your administrators and like, hey, how can we help our English learners to participate and engage in this HQIM? So this is where we're coming from.
So the first one that we are going to discuss is the culture of learning, environmental readiness. The overall picture of this is, are the students involved in the classroom? We want our ELs to participate. We want them to feel comfortable. Are they being fully embraced into the classroom? And some of the questions that we can ask to ensure some of this, the first task is students complete instructional tasks, volunteer responses, and ask appropriate questions. Okay, so some questions are, do ELs need the teacher to rephrase or repeat their instruction in shorter steps or more explicitly? As teachers, we know what we want to happen in the classroom. And sometimes when we give those instructions, we forget to break it down. So we really have to be mindful to ensure that we are breaking it down step by step, not only for our EL students, but for all of our students. Would ELs benefit from a sentence stem frame to share their ideals? to have a sentence frame or a sentence stem. It's just going to help prepare them if they freeze up and they don't know how to start their conversation. Did you model the talk first? Did you model to students how to ask clarifying questions? We assume that questions are an easy thing to ask. They're not, so we need to ensure that we are explicitly modeling how to ask questions. We need to ensure that we are encouraging all of our students to answer incomplete sentences to assist with those to ask questions. Were students able to think, pair, share with a partner before expected to answer or respond out loud? Are we giving students a chance to brainstorm with their partners or hear a peer language so they can model that when they respond out loud?
All right, so this leads us into a think, pair, share for you guys, because as we are saying, this is what we need for our students to do, and this is what we need for our teachers to do. This is nothing new to you. So what I want you guys to do is look at this question. What are some ideas you have to support English learners in understanding and following teachers' behavior, expectations, and directions? So you're thinking for your English learners, right? What ideas do you have that would support your English learners? If a teacher was to come to you, what would you say? What would you ask, right? So just take a moment, and then if you'll share that with your partner. So I think
concise language when we're supposed to do this, and they're gone.
All right, come back. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, who would like to share an idea that they have? Ooh, we got a surprise. Just saying, surprise.
The first person to share gets a prize.
Oh, there we go.
We talked about using visuals, of course, perhaps having hand signals that you use to work with behavior expectations that are regular, like sit down, or whatever. I don't know what grade level we're in here. But also bilingual buddies, although those sometimes teachers can over-rely on those students to explain everything, so that it's the first go-to when you don't know what else to do. So how can we avoid that? We didn't quite get past that point in our discussion.
Very good.
So I'm a kindergarten teacher. So in my classroom, I do a buddy system with my ESLs, and I've also used like visuals, just like she said. What else do we got?
Talk about hand motions.
Oh yes, and hand motions.
Awesome, good job. Thank you, thank you. So what I want you to remember is this is coming from when your students and when your English learners are in their classroom and they're supposed to be involved in the learning, what are we doing to help them, right? So this leads us to task 2. That's the second bullet under cultural environment.
I want to sit there and point out I loved using the gestures, and that's also a powerful way to let the teacher know without calling on a specific student. Hey, I'm ready, I can speak, I'm ready, I've thought about this. So the hand gestures are wonderful. Okay, some questions that we can ask for the task 2. Did you explain and model your behavior expectations for students who have never attended schools in U.S. and for our recently arrived English learners throughout the year? At the beginning of the year, we're very good at explicitly teaching our routines and our expected behaviors. Sometimes we can get students whatever time of the year. We need to make sure that we are going back and explicitly teaching these students and consistently reviewing these throughout the year. Would your ELs benefit from having the directions available both orally and in writing with appropriate visuals? Visuals, visuals, visuals. We need visuals everywhere. That is not the only scaffold, but we need those in place, even in high school. So we can have a visual schedule. Sometimes, and that will just take out some load and anxiety. Students can just look at the schedule and know what is expected next. Did you repeat the directions so the students could process them? After you say the directions and you have modeled, make sure that you're repeating the directions so the students can tie everything together at that point. Sometimes we have to give our brains a few seconds to process all of our information. That leads us to our next target, task 3. Students execute transition routines and procedures in an orderly and efficient manner. Once again, visuals, visuals, visuals. Visuals will help with transitions. Explicitly teach these transitions and routines. That's going to cut down on time. You're going to have more learning time, teaching time in the classroom if everyone knows what they're expected to do during transition and routines. Task 4, students are engaged in the work of the lesson from start to finish. There is a sense of urgency about how time is used. Oftentimes, we may have assistants in the classroom helping us. We want to ensure that our students are allowed to productively struggle throughout the whole lesson. We want to, if they are stuck, we need to provide those scaffolds and encourage them to go on. A lot of the time, many times people will jump in and just do it for them without thinking that they're helping. We need to encourage everyone to allow them to productively struggle. Are appropriate scaffolds implemented to ensure engagement from start to finish? If we have those scaffolds in place, then hopefully the students will complete the task from start to finish.
And one thing I want to add here is when you're talking about your proficiency levels, remember you are the ESL teacher, right? So you might have to reach out to those teachers who are saying, oh, my students can't do this, or whatever they're saying. You're going to come in with a positive approach and you're say, hold on, let me look at the ALDs, right? What can they do to do this activity, right? And that's what I'm looking for when I go in and I'm observing some of these classrooms and I'm seeing that my EL students, they're not doing anything. I'm like, well, this is a recently arrived student. There's no supports, right? So did I have that collaboration with that teacher to help them? If I did have that collaboration, was it followed through with so that they could participate from beginning to finish to their ability level? All right, another think, pair, share. This is leading us to the next task. How can teachers help English learners feel included in their classroom culture? So take a moment, think about it, and then share with your partner.
It's like utilizing turn and talks, oral rehearsals, so that they feel like they're.
All right, come back. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Who would like to share their idea? I saw her. Or you saw her first? Okay.
I love how we talk about culture, we talk about student culture, but we need to help our fellow teachers understand their own culture, because until we understand our own culture and how it can change the way we view others, we can't help them see the other cultures. So,
Exactly. I agree with that. And you would be surprised what we do see in year 2025, right?
At a previous school that I worked at, they would just like kind of invite their culture in, like, you know, we're talking about the sun. How do you say sun in your language? Or even label sun up there under sun, you know. But one good tradition that I really enjoyed was when it was a student's birthday, they sang it in Spanish and they sang it in English.
Yes.
And the kids, they got all fired up doing that. So I always like doing that.
I love that, yes. All right.
I was going to say, so we talked about learning their names, how to pronounce their names. That's something seems like it might be trivial, but it matters. Names are important. And the other thing that we talked about in your classroom libraries, having books that represents other cultures. Also in your teaching, when you bring in those supplemental materials, trying to find materials that also represents other cultures so that they can start seeing themselves in the learning and they feel like they're valued and that they're important, and then that helps them to also engage.
Thank you. All of those are great ideas, and the name is important as well. I've had teachers come to me and say, hey, this student answers to 3 different ways of saying their name. I'm like, okay, well, let's have the interpreter call home and ask the parent, how do we need to pronounce this student's name, right? Sometimes my interpreters have said, no, this is how you say it. But you have to remember, some of our Spanish interpreters are from Colombia, from Puerto Rico, right? So what they might be familiar with may not be the way that they're pronouncing it, right? So sometimes we have to take that step and remind them, hold on, let's take a step back. Let's see what the parents say, right?
We have one more.
Okay, yes.
We're a small school system, but at the end of the year, within the last month of school, we had 3 newcomers. And these 3 newcomers came from California, but the school system that they came from, they didn't really have to speak English. So even though they had been in California for several years, they didn't speak any English when they got to us. And that was hard for the teachers being in a rural environment. So one of our first, our goal was that I didn't want them to feel like some foreign object that was just placed in the classroom and they had no ability to communicate to their teachers, or the teachers didn't even have the ability to understand what they were saying. And so what we did is I contacted their stepmom and I said, do you mind if I record them? And then they're going to introduce themselves to their teachers, and only their teachers will get this link, and they'll be instructed that when they're done with the video, that they're to delete it. That way they had privacy, and they wouldn't have to have this out. It wouldn't be anywhere else, and it wasn't for their peers to see. And so then what we did was we went through and did a whole about me segment, their favorite foods, their favorite things, their age. And then it took a long time to do it because we had to go through and like, what is this in English? And then we practiced it out, the whole thing. And then we ran it through several times and I told them, okay, I'm not gonna keep this video until you're happy with it. So for my girls, it was kind of funny because they didn't like the angle it was on. And they're like, hold on, one more time. And so they would, we redid it, and I said, if you're happy with it, this is what I'm gonna send to your teachers. So we wrote the whole script out, and then we practiced the pronunciation so that they could speak in English to their professors. So it sounds like maybe not a big task, but what was maybe a 3-minute video took us quite a while. But then we sent that to their teachers, and it was huge because they're like, they refuse to speak in class. I'm like, they're not gonna right now, okay? They're not gonna speak because they don't want everyone staring at them and critiquing their accent and making fun of them. They already feel like they're the biggest thing in the classroom. They don't wanna speak right now. And so, of course, they're not answering, they're not asking questions, they're not gonna do those things. You have to understand, and for that, I think that's the biggest part of what we're saying about the teacher's bias too. They automatically sometimes assume that just because they're quiet means they don't understand. I'm like, they're silent, period, okay? Don't talk like they don't understand you. Don't treat them like they don't belong. Don't let them see that you are nervous for them being in the classroom because they just want to feel loved. And that's probably a lot, and you probably want me off time right there. But anyway, that was that one video. It was small. But our teachers, that might have been the only conversation of words that they heard from those kids.
Sorry. No, that was great. So this is what I need us all to understand. We are coming from an ESL perspective, okay? We know a lot of what we're talking about, right? But what we are having to look at is we need to bring all of this to our general education teachers. And as Joanne and Raven said earlier, there's gonna be some tough times, right? You know, but at the end of the day, it's for our students and it's for their educational career and their success in society. So when we're bringing in that culture, that's what we're looking for, right? Thank you.
For Learning Task 5, students and their teachers demonstrate a joy for learning throughout positive relationships and strong classroom culture that is responsive to students' interests, experiences, and approaches to learning. I cannot emphasize how important it is to build the relationships. Our relationships with our students is going to take a student from mediocre to extraordinary. They need people to believe in them. They need to feel like, hey, it's okay for me to make a mistake. No one is going to punish me. No one is going to yell at me. I'm comfortable in here. And like you all had said, we need to provide text or supplemental text that allows them to see themselves in their curriculum. It also helps build that background knowledge for our HQIM. So anytime we have that, we need to put that opportunity into our classrooms. Take those 15 minutes to build those relationships. You can do some of the things that I've done in the past have been a show and tell, even for my older kids. You can make it very specific on what you want them to bring in, but ensure that everybody has some time throughout the year. Also have a little affirmation station. During TCAPs, I go into the classroom and I do read aloud for my students. So I also do read aloud for the other students that aren't ELs. And during this time, we do a little share out. Let's do an affirmation, something positive, and those students, they love it. And every time they see me in the hallway, they stop and talk. And this is from I see them from when they're in 3rd grade all the way up to high school. And they always remember that. So those relationships are extremely important.
And then something else to think about is sometimes it's just something quick. Some of the things that we've talked about is like you might do it for like a day or something like that, but sometimes it's quick. So when I'm in a classroom and I'm watching instruction happen and they're talking about vocabulary, right, academic vocabulary, or even those tier 2 words, I'm thinking, couldn't the teacher have taken a moment to ask the student, how would you say this in your native language, right? Because the whole part of having the student to participate and be a part of your classroom learning is that they're a part of it, right? So you can't exclude some of the language that they do have. So that sums up the culture of learning for task 5. And the way that we approached it is not going to be the way that you might see it in your district. But this is the things that we're looking at from an English learner to be able to participate and for teachers to see that, okay, is my general education teacher really making learning and participation accessible to all my students, right? So this is a very important section.
So core action 1, high quality text at the center of instruction. As it's been mentioned throughout the day, we should all have access to HQIM, not only our EL students, but the EL teachers. If you don't, make sure you discuss it with your supervisor and talk to the gen ed teachers to get access to it. Where ELs provided time to preview the material in advance. Sometimes just that few 5 minutes beforehand will do wonders for them during the discussion. Whenever I have previewed the whole story, we may go through a picture walk where we read it. The teachers always come back to me and say, hey, they really got this time. So those, just reviewing it will be powerful.
Okay, one thing I do want to mention is your high quality instructional materials. There's a reason why the state is pushing for all ELA and districts to use HQIM. One reason is because it has the access points and it has a lot of the supports that our students need without them having to come to you. I didn't realize this until I was doing this presentation and I went through our HQIM. Did it take me a few minutes? Probably, yeah, because I wasn't familiar with the HQIM. There were tabs everywhere. But when I got in there, I was like, oh my gosh, do this for ESLs. Here's your sentence stem. This is what you need to do. And so really, your teachers have a lot of the support that they need, right? You're that additional person. So if I have that newcomer and I don't know how to reach them, or I have a different student, you're that extra voice for their ELPA scores and their proficiency levels. All right, so core action 2. This is what I have taken away from this. Core action 2 is what has the teacher done in order to prepare all of her students to access Tier 1 instruction. What has the teacher done? It's not planning. How have they prepped, right? Have they already previewed the questions? Have they already previewed the text to see where are those students going to struggle? So this is very important to you to take back, to say, when your teachers come to you and say, my students cannot access the HQIM. Well, hold on a minute. let's go back and think about core action 2, all right? So core action 2, task A, focuses on the teacher's effective use of questions and tasks. So the teacher's questions and tasks, do they address the text by attending to its particular qualitative features? For example, the meaning, the purpose, the language, the structure, the knowledge demands, okay? You gotta break this down. What I took from this is they're in HQIM. These texts have complexity for a reason, right? As the Tier 1 teacher, they are needing to go through and see where exactly is the text going to be complex for my English learner, right? So one question I might ask a teacher is, where in the text can you see that the sentence structure may interfere with English learners' comprehension or the ability to complete the task? So a lot of the times we see that they're working on a task and they don't understand the directions or the prompt, right? It's because of the way it might be formatted or the language demands of it. So let's look at this for a second. Here's an example from a 5th grade HQIM about Jackie Robinson. It says, whatever obstacles I found made me fight all the harder, but it would have been impossible for me to fight it all except that I was sustained by the personal and deep-rooted belief that my fight had a chance. Think of your English learners, okay? I've got one in 5th grade who didn't come until he was in 3rd grade learning English. How can I make this accessible for that student? How can I help my teachers, right? So take a minute. What I want you to do is, why would this sentence structure be difficult for an English learner to understand? So take a minute, discuss with your people. What stands out to you? Because this is what we are pointing out to our general education teachers, right? This is where, when you're prepping for your students to learn the HQIM, this is what you're pointing out to them. This is where they might struggle.
Yes, and also the structure, like the way they started. Whatever obstacles I found, comma, but it would have been impossible for me to fight them. Like just like the structure of it, just going over like conditional words and
Deeply rooted means a lot of time has passed.
All right, come back. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. First person to share out.
So we talked about a couple of different things. First, the background of knowing who Jackie Robinson is would be difficult, and you would need to know who he was and what he was facing to understand the complexity in the text that's there.
Right.
But then we went on to talk about some of the language that's used, like deep-rooted belief. How would that translate for them, and would they be able to internalize and understand what that meant?
Right.
And even as an adult, you have to read it a couple times to really think, like, what?
And
what's the goal there? And then you expect a child to read it once and then go. Like, are there enough, if it's a Spanish speaker, are there enough cognates for them to kind of understand it? Or would they really have to talk about it to really get the message there?
Right, exactly. One thing I do want to point out that I missed was that as part of the lesson, this was for a recording to be played. Right? So if your students, your English learners are just listening to this lesson, it was about like this long, I went in and I actually printed the transcript. So that would be another option for your teachers, okay? And actually have them read it to see what are they listening to, because that's heavy oral processing and understanding, right? You're exactly right. Okay, so a few things that I would also mention. The word would, right? Do they know what that means? Okay, and how does it impact the sentence? This is also a complex compound sentence, right? And I heard somebody give an example over here of a suggestion of how to make this accessible to the students to understand and comprehend. Also, the word accept. This wasn't one of the words that was part of the Tier 3 vocabulary, but do they need to know what that word means, right? This is going back to the intellectual prep. What has the teacher done to prepare for the understanding to not happen because they are English learners? Another thing you can ask them, can you annotate these areas to increase their comprehension? As I heard you guys say, will chunking help them to identify where they will need to stop and think. You might have to do that for some of the students, right? Is this important? Yes. How many times did you have to stop and break this down, right? And we're adults. All right, another question you might think for Core Action 2, Task A. Do you need to build students' background knowledge before completing the task? Do they know who Jackie Robinson is, right? Do they have a picture of him? Do they even know what baseball is, right? Do you have specific questions for your lower proficiency ELs? Remember, this is talking about your questions. So you might have specific questions you've already planned for your lower proficient students that they can answer with a yes or no, right? But your higher proficient students, they might have more of an explanation to go with that. Have you previewed the questions and the tasks with them in advance to decrease their affective filter and to ensure they understand the instructional language in the question and the task? So reminding the teachers, hey, if you have a break in your instruction the day before, sit with them for a minute, briefly go over this with them, right? Task B. So this one focuses on, and this links to Core Action 3. So remember this question. Questions and tasks require students to use evidence from the text to demonstrate understanding and to support their ideas about the text. These ideas are expressed through written and oral responses. So through the IPG, we're looking, are the students being able to orally express what the text evidence is, and can they also do it in writing? But what can the teacher do? Has the teacher modeled locating text evidence? And this is across all grade levels, okay? Have you modeled locating the text evidence and explicitly explain what it means to support it? Do our English learners know what it means to support something, right? Would your English learners have better access to the task by pre-highlighting? Wasn't this in our crosswalk this morning? Pre-highlighting some of the text evidence. So maybe can the teacher take a moment and highlight that text evidence for that student that needs it so they're not overwhelmed by that whole text, right? Could you highlight 2 to 3 sentences and have the English learner determine the best evidence to decrease language processing overload? And I will tell you, and you guys already know, them trying to locate text evidence is hard in the first place, and them trying to support it is even harder, right? Which English learners need the text to be chunked? To make sure that is a section where the evidence is located. Maybe you've chunked that, you know that's where the evidence is, right? And you can tell them where that's at, but they can go through and find it on their own. To reduce their language processing overload. Would your English learners have better access to completing the task by numbering the paragraphs and informing your ELs that each numbered paragraph has text evidence? Can your lower proficient ELs match the evidence to the supporting details by allowing them to focus on matching the key words, right? We're going to have to find a way to help our teachers, help them to access the HQIM. Task C. This one focuses on academic vocabulary. Questions and tasks attend to the words, the academic vocabulary, the phrases, and the sentences within the text. So when we're looking at classroom instruction, and I'm just saying I don't know if they will come into your classroom as ESL teachers. You're working on academic vocabulary. Do your questions and tasks attend to those words? So do you have visuals available for your English learners to understand? Do you have a word bank for essential vocabulary? What additional specific vocabulary do you think your ELs may need to know to access content vocabulary? So that's where you're bridging those tier 2 words to tier 3 words. That was talked about this morning. And I will show you an example later of just how much tier 2 words I found that my students would need to have prior experience to. Can you front load this vocabulary? Task C. Have you planned opportunities for English learners to create meaning? Remember, we need them to keep that vocabulary. So you may want them, not may, you really want them to create oral sentences. So when I'm in a classroom, my students should be using that vocabulary, creating their own meaning. And I'm saying that to my district. And I'm saying that to my ESL teachers, and I'm saying that to my general education teachers. Because if they don't use it orally, they're not going to use it in writing, right? D, questions and tasks are sequenced to build knowledge by guiding students to delve deeper into the text and graphics. Sequencing. So when you are thinking about your questions, you're like, oh man, I asked one question, but they weren't there yet because I didn't sequence. I didn't intellectually prep for my questions. Are you strategic with your questions and tasks? Have you planned specific questions that allow lower proficient ELs to answer in words or short phrases? Do your questions build in complexity and promote deeper thinking, right? We don't want them always answering those low-level questions. We need to help them have the strategies and the supports to answer those deeper thinking questions. All right, so this is core action 3. Core action 2 is about what has the teacher done to prep the instruction, right? Core action 3 is your opportunities for student engagement. So how are your students engaging in the HQIM? How are they engaging in your classroom? So the task A says, the teacher poses questions and tasks that allow opportunities for students to do the majority of the work. And students engage in those opportunities, look, our 4 domains: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So one suggestion I would have for a teacher: explicitly explain the target question. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen the teacher quickly go through that target question. Or ESL teachers not have a language objective, right? They don't know what they're learning if they don't have the target question or the language objective. And have the student re-explain it to ensure they understand. Provide wait time and prompt English learners as needed to get them over their freeze. So don't skip over them. Just help them get along and to help them participate in their class. Implement the think, pair, share, and write. I cannot tell you how many times I've been in a classroom. The think is left off. You've got 30 seconds to turn to your partner, share your ideas. Turn and talk. I'm like, man, I don't even know what they're supposed to be talking about. But here in 30 seconds, they're going to be sharing their thoughts. Remind them that the think time is critical, or you're not going to get an appropriate response. Task B, the teacher expects evidence and precision from students and probes students' answers accordingly. So this goes back to core action 2. The students provide the text evidence and support their ideas and display precision in their oral and written responses. So what we would recommend, reduce the student affective filter by starting your response with a positive statement that reflects positivity. I would suggest, you have the idea. Let's look deeper. You're wanting them to expand on that. What else can you tell me? Let us think about how you can expand your answer by including text evidence and supporting your reasons. Chunking a text into sections for lower proficient ELs, right? Provide a sentence stem or a frame to support those students with organizing their thoughts. This is how we're going to help them participate in the instruction. Core action 3, task C. The teacher cultivates reasoning and meaning by allowing the students to productively struggle. I've seen this as well. Does the student understand the task or purpose of learning? If not, re-explain it. And you don't have to do it to the whole class. Remind the teachers, go to that student and re-explain it, right? Model thinking aloud. Sometimes we have to remember these are some best practices, right? Remind the students to refer to your scaffolds and supports, such as anchor charts and reference books. So if the teacher says, well, they don't give any answers, okay, well, did you remind them to look at your scaffolds that you have on the wall? Did you remind them to take out their reference books, right? It is important to be a facilitator for learning at this time. Task D. The teacher creates conditions for students' conversations where students are encouraged to talk and ask questions about each other's thinking, and students engage in those opportunities in order to clarify or improve their understanding. Just a moment. Raise your hand if you've been in classrooms where all day long you see your students are talking. All day long. You go in there and you see your students are talking. They're in 6th grade, your students are talking. They're in 10th grade, your students are talking about academic stuff, right? Exactly, right. And so with that, we have to remind our teachers, we have to show them how to talk academically, and we have to control that. All right, so one thing to think about, it is not a race. Think time is critical. Model using sentence stems and frames, and I cannot say this enough, this is at all grade levels. Remind your teachers. It's at all grade levels, right? Think of you as an adult and you're having to give information today and you're having to share your answer. A sentence stem might have helped a little bit, right? Model to your English learners how to clarify their understanding. All right, task E, the teacher deliberately checks for understanding about the lesson and adapts the lesson according to the student understanding. And the students refine their written and oral responses. So for this, we would recommend, does the teacher have a clear understanding for the purpose of learning? I'll be quick about this. I was observing a classroom, and I knew from teaching kindergarten that the standard was for the students to retell a story. We went through there, the students never retold a story. But the principal, oh, that was great. What was the purpose for learning? The students were supposed to be retelling the story. So we have to make sure as a district that we're reminding our teachers, we have to remember the purpose for learning, and we have to share that with our students. When planning, identify checking for understanding areas. You might want to tell your teachers that. You have your checking for understanding in your curriculum, but there might be other sections where you have to point that out. Task E, consider making small adjustments to questions and tasks if they appear to struggle. Summarization by students. After a few sentences or paragraphs or a page, remind your teachers to go and have the students summarize orally. And that's actually for everybody. Remember, this is to have the students engage and access Tier 1 instruction. So this leads us to core action 4, our HQIM Access for All. One thing to think about is if the teacher and you have all worked through these first core 1, core 2, and core 3 actions, core action 4 is really supported because you already have the sentence stems and stuff that you've planned for.
The most important part for me to state is attached to in our resources to our PowerPoint is gold. It is a list of scaffolds that can be used when you're in a meeting and the questions you can present with a gen ed teacher. These will be with me at all times for Acceleration for All meetings. Anyway, I think the heaviest statement is task A for core action 4, and that is supports promote access to the same text and learning task of all students without modifying or changing the ultimate student expectation. And that right there is like the heavy weight on my shoulders at all times. I won't go on past that. That's the one I get the most phone calls asking for support and training is I have a newcomer arrive. They're in 6th grade, they walked in, they're sitting at a desk. I've handed them the text, I've handed them an activity. Now what do we do? The teachers are calling and flipping out, right? I'm sure you've had those calls as well. Well, the good news is Core 1 through 3 has went through the steps to help you get to that point. But just to review, some good things that you can work with the teacher on is, did you pre-teach vocabulary? Did you provide visuals? Provide and explicitly explain exemplars? Did you highlight the text? Did you paint a sentence so students can reread and focus on the essential information for learning? And so highlighting is my go-to. I love it. So that the kids are learning English. So we want to decrease that cognitive load, right? So why present an entire text to them? Why not highlight just the essential parts that they need in that activity? And it can vary. If you have a newcomer, you might highlight 3 words. You might move up to a sentence, a paragraph, a page. So it can be adjusted. So highlighting is a great tip for the classroom. Task B, supports address specific student learning needs and are based on recent and relevant learning data. And the supports are temporary and leveraged only when necessary. Well, it's very easy, the first part. Our support's based on individual data. I think these days we have a lot of data to use. ILPs, ILPDs, ELPA 21, progress monitoring benchmark. I could go on and on and on. But I think the caveat to this is determining when to remove some of those scaffolds. Just because we place those in the beginning doesn't mean they need it throughout the year. So that's a conversation you have maybe during Acceleration for All, or maybe just a communication between you and the EL teacher, is when to start trying out removing some of those scaffolds. Okay, let's see, supports used address the prerequisite skill standards that students need to access the grade level. And you're gonna have several students that come to you without the prerequisites, right, for a variety of reasons. So you have to ask yourself, what scaffolds can I put in place so that this student can accomplish this on grade level task, right? They just came in country. What are we gonna do? So some ideas that we can give you is a vowel chart, a sound wall to refer to. They could use graphic vocabulary cards. And for math, you might provide a multiplication table. So I had a math teacher come to me 5th grade and say, look at this paper, your student missed everything. I feel terrible marking X's on the whole paper. What am I supposed to do? She can't multiply, and today's standard isn't even about multiplying. It's a completely different standard, but she has to be able to do this to complete it. And you kind of look at them like, okay, pretty simple fix. Let's put a multiplication table on her desk. Now we'll work on that in the background in our class through the year, but today's lesson has nothing to do with multiplication, and she doesn't have that background. So let's just slide in some of those scaffolds to help students be successful in Tier 1. And we'll move to 4 real quickly, and that's just, we want students to feel pride in their work, and independence helps build that pride. And independence and pride build ownership. So our goal is to fulfill all these core 1 through 4 so that our students can be independent and successful.
And I'll go over this quickly. This is just a quick example. You have your standards, like we went over the crosswalk. What are the language functions? And this is what I'm trying to help my teachers and general education teachers. What does it look like when I'm prepping? What are the vocabulary that I need to look at? Tier 3 words are in yellow. Tier 2 words are in blue. So I've shown that I've done the prepping for this. I've marked in here an area where I might need to check for understanding. I might have students summarize this 3rd paragraph right here, right? Here are some references. I guess we'll close this out, that today's presentation really was to help send you back to your schools and your teachers, that with some questions that you can ask them when you're at the table, because eventually you are going to be at the table and we're supposed to help collaborate and help them access that Tier 1 instruction using the same HQIM, not giving them a different text. So we can't go back and say, oh, they can't read this. They don't understand what this says. We need them to be in the same HQIM. But how can we, as ESL teachers, help them access that information? Okay? And another thing, you guys, I'm sure you knew everything that we shared today, right? But it's just having it in your pocket, in your toolbox, so you can have it quickly and to be prepared for those meetings. Unlike us who are like, oh, okay, that sounds good, right? But now I have something to come back with to make sure my students are accessing that Tier 1 instruction. Thank you.